If you play the Create mod, you most likely know that Andesite Alloy is a very important item to have, which is why I'll be showing you how to automate it using this simple farm so you'll never have to run out of Andesite Alloy again. And this farm also includes a way to automatically stop itself when it gets full, a display board so you can see how many items are inside of the storage without actually having to go look inside the storage, and I'll also show you how to give this build power just in case you don't have excess power available. And we will also be needing an infinite lava source for this build, and this is basically what that looks like. And basically how this works is you have a giant pool of lava that has a volume of 10,000 blocks at least, and we do need to fill this whole thing with lava, but you can actually just fill the top layer with lava and let that flow down, and that will count towards the total 10,000 blocks of lava that you need for this to be considered an infinite source. And this hose pulley item here is actually what allows you to get that lava, and basically what you have to do with it is give it some power on the shaft that it has, and as you can see you can either bring it up or down depending on the direction of rotation. And once we have our hose all the way down at the bottom of our lava pool, we can see that this has a little fluid pipe area where we can place something like a mechanical pump on, give this power, and that will output lava through fluid pipes, and you can bring that all the way over to your build, since that's where we'll be needing our lava. And now that we know how to get our infinite lava, we can see what we actually need this lava for in our recipes. And since we'll be making an andesite alloy farm, we can check what the recipe for that is, and we can actually see that we have this recipe here, but that's a manual crafting one, which could be automated with the mechanical crafters, but there's actually a better way with the mixer, which allows us to use half the items for the same amount of andesite alloy. And we won't be using the recipe where it needs zinc nuggets because those are a lot more difficult to automate than iron nuggets. And plus we get something else from automating the iron nuggets anyway, which is flint. And we'll be using this recipe where we bulk wash gravel, and that will get us a 25% chance at a piece of flint and a 12% chance at an iron nugget. And to get the gravel, we crush cobblestone, and to get the cobblestone, we'll have a cobblestone generator. And we'll actually be using this flint for the andesite, and the recipe we'll be using for andesite is this one, where you compact lava, gravel, and flint into a piece of andesite. And of course, this is where that lava comes in, and this is easy because we already know how to make the flint, gravel, and lava. And we can see that for every 2 flint you get 1 andesite, and since you get exactly twice as much flint as you do iron nuggets, that means we'll be getting the exact amount of iron nuggets we need while we're making the flint to make all of our andesite into alloy. However, we will need an 8:1 ratio with the amount of gravel that we use for making andesite and the amount that we use for making flint and iron nuggets, because 1 gravel here makes 1 andesite, but 8 gravel makes 2 flint. So that's why we'll be needing to split them 8:1. And we can get that split perfect by just using a couple of brass funnels and some chests. So for this build, we'll need a 15 by 11 block foundation. So all of these blocks here are going to be what we need for this build, except for that these 3 stacks of blocks include the foundation size, and also they don't have to be smooth stone, they can be anything you want. And then the glass, it would be nicer if you could use glass because it could help you see inside the cobblestone generator, but if you don't want to get glass, you could just use any other block, and that should be fine. And in addition to this, we also have this chest, which is optional stuff. And this top row of blocks here is just a display system, which allows you to see on a little board the amount of items, which in this case is andesite alloy, you actually have made in your farm. And this other row here that we have is just for a steam engine for power if you don't have that already. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot that we will be needing a hand crank and item drain just so we can put some lava into a fluid tank. And if you're wondering, this item is just a pickaxe. I get how that can be confusing if you don't use the Create Stuff in Additions mod. And now that we know all of the recipes for this build, we can go ahead and start building. And to do that, we'll need to go to this corner here and place down a 3x3x3 item vault. And we're actually going to be starting with our cobblestone generator. And this is where the items from that generator will go into before we process them. And now above this item vault, we'll need to place hoppers, then windmill sail frames, mechanical pumps on top of those. And these mechanical pumps all need to be facing down into those windmill sail frames. And we'll need to place some glass around these sides of the windmill sail frames and mechanical pumps just so water and items don't fall out. And then on this side, we'll place 3 more glass. And we'll also want to place a cogwheel right here. And we'll connect this up to something later when we have something to connect it to, but for now, we'll just place the cogwheel there so the water doesn't spill out. But before we put the water here, we can actually go ahead and pick up one of those pumps temporarily, place down our fluid tank here, and then use one of those pumps so we can actually pump that lava bucket into the fluid tank, since with this, you'll actually only ever need 1 lava bucket. So we can go ahead and give this a large cogwheel, an item drain, a hand crank, and some lava in that item drain. Then we pump all of this into that fluid tank. We can pick this stuff back up and make sure to keep the fluid tank there. We can put back our mechanical pump here and then waterlog all of them. And we can do that easily by just waterlogging these 2 corner ones and then doing a 3rd corner over here, and that will get the whole thing filled in. And once you've done that, we're good to fill in the top of this with the rest of the fluid tanks, and this should turn into 1 giant fluid tank, which will keep that 1 lava bucket we put in earlier. And now we'll need to use the mechanism that actually allows us to break this cobblestone. And we're going to do that by picking up these windmill sail frames on a contraption and then placing them back down once the cobblestone is created by this water flowing down as well as these mechanical pumps pumping lava onto that water. And to make this minecart contraption, we're just going to need to simply place down 1 block here, a rail on top with a cart assembler and minecart, and then 1 more block on top. And this one we'll need to make sure that it is solid, because otherwise it won't transmit redstone signal. And we can see here that once this lever is on, it powers the cart assembler and allows it to pick up the whole contraption. But as a contraption, it can't transmit a redstone signal to a non-contraption block, meaning that this cart assembler will sit all of those blocks back down, which will break the cobblestone, and that short amount of time that it's actually being picked up is just enough for that cobblestone to be made. And other than the power to these mechanical pumps, this whole system for the cobblestone generator should be finished, which means that we're now able to move on to the processing of the cobblestone. And of course, the first thing that we'll need to process this cobblestone into is going to be gravel. And to do that, we can start by placing a 3-block long belt here with an output brass funnel. And then we'll also need to actually place 1 shaft in the middle with gearboxes on either side of it. And on top of those gearboxes, we'll be placing our crushing wheels. And then we'll need to put a buffer in here, which we can just use a chest for with an andesite funnel and an output brass funnel. And the reason we need a buffer is so we can get that 8:1 ratio just right. So what we can do is have this one output exactly 36 items at a time. Then we'll place a 5-block long belt here. We'll need 1 more chest with 1 input andesite funnel and 2 output brass funnels like this. And what happens here is we have 36 items go into this chest, which we can actually split by doing exactly 4 items output here and exactly 32 items outputting from this one. And I'm actually now realizing that we will need to have a belt in between this chest, which means that we're going to have to break that belt and replace it with 2 smaller ones, and then a 4-block belt going in between just like that. And then on the end of this belt we can place a chest with an input andesite funnel to act as another buffer. And now since we have 36 items going in and we have 4 going out here and 32 going out here, that means that we have that perfect 8-to-1 ratio of items that we need to have. And now that we have something to connect up this cogwheel to, we can do that by placing a clutch here, and this is actually going to stop this whole cobblestone generator from working in the event that your storage gets too full so you don't overflow and lag from excess items. And then we'll need 2 vertical gearboxes like this. This bottom one will attach to a rotation speed controller, and attached to that rotation speed controller we'll have a cogwheel, or a large cogwheel rather, and we'll want to set this to 1 RPM since the speed that these mechanical pumps spin at actually doesn't matter, which means that we can just spin them at the slowest speed so they don't take up extra stress units. And we also have a choice here of where to connect up this belt to this one, since we could either put 3 encased chain drives on this side or this side. It doesn't matter which one you pick, just pick whichever one is better for your build, and I think I'll go with this one because leaving this open makes it look a bit nicer from the outside. And then we'll also need to connect up this belt to this one, and to do that and get it spinning the correct direction we'll need to place a gearbox here. However, the same can't be said for placing a gearbox here, because that would get this belt spinning the wrong way. So what we'll actually need to do is place a vertical gearbox and then a regular one here, and that'll get this spinning the opposite direction with this gearbox, and then spinning back to the correct one with this gearbox. And now to wash the gravel that comes off of this belt, we'll need to place down a encased fan here, and to the side of it we'll need a 3x3x1 block item vault just like that, as well as a brass funnel here and some water so we can actually wash that gravel. And to keep the gravel from going straight into this brass funnel, we can give it a filter. And by give it a filter, I didn't mean actually put that in the vault. What I actually meant is that we can open up this filter here and give it an iron nugget and flint as a filter. Set this to only allow those 2 items. And then we can go ahead and put that filter on the brass funnel, which tells it to not input that gravel since we don't want it in there. And then we'll also need a block on the end to keep that gravel from just going too far this way. Or you could use a copycat panel with a block, and that'll give you more space to walk around and it looks a bit nicer. And of course you could not put the block in there, but that will allow the fan to push the air through, and if you're standing in this line you'll get pushed along it, so you can just prevent that by putting a solid block in that copycat panel. But another problem we see here is that whenever this belt outputs its items, it's not going to just drop them onto the ground nicely, it's going to fling them into the vault, which will put the items right up against the vault, meaning they can't actually get into this funnel since they'll just be hitting up against it rather than being in front of it. And to fix that, we can grab any wall you'd like and place that right here, which will make it so that whenever these items go off the belt, they hit into this wall and they'll fall down, and that'll give them enough space to be in front of that funnel so they can actually get picked up. And to power this encased fan, we'll need to place 2 encased chain drives and either a gearbox or a shaft here, depending on which of them allows your fan to spin the correct direction. But now that we have our gravel, flint, and iron nuggets automated, we'll need to actually turn that flint and gravel into andesite, which we can do by placing an output brass funnel here, which will go onto a belt that will have 1 shaft here. We'll leave 1 block in between and place another shaft. We'll leave another block, place a shaft, and then leave 2 more blocks and place another shaft. And finally, we'll connect all of those up with a mechanical belt. And on the end of this mechanical belt, we'll have our buffer, which stores that andesite in the form of a chest with an andesite funnel inputting. And then we'll also need our mechanical press and basin here. And we can easily input our gravel by placing one andesite funnel here. And I'm just now realizing that we need to move this basin and mechanical press over a block. That's my bad, along with the funnel. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to place down a mechanical belt here with an output brass funnel filtered to only output flint, as well as an input andesite funnel so we can input that flint. And we'll also need to set this recipe filter to only make andesite, just in case you have another mod in your mod pack that allows any of the items going into the basin to be turned into something else, since we don't want that. And then we'll of course need our output brass funnel filtered to only output andesite, just so it doesn't output any of the other items. And to connect up this belt to power, we can actually use this shaft that we placed here earlier. And the item you need here will depend on the item you have here. So if you have a gearbox right here, you'll need to place another gearbox to connect up this belt. But if you have a shaft here already, you'll need a shaft here, since we need both of these belts here to be spinning the same direction, and using two shafts won't change the direction at all, and using two gearboxes will change it to one direction and then change it back. And now the final bit of automation that we need to do is taking our iron nuggets and andesite and just turning them into andesite alloy. And to do that, we'll need to place down a 7-block long mechanical belt. And we'll be placing our two mechanical mixers right here with input andesite funnels, as well as another belt just like this so we can have our iron nuggets go on to here with a brass funnel to output. And then we'll also need another brass funnel here to output that andesite as well. And then of course this one will have to have a filter on it, because otherwise it could output flint, which we definitely don't want. We'll place our two mixers above the basins. And on the end of this belt, we'll actually want a chest here with an andesite funnel, and we'll have this output items into lava. And this is just in case we get an excess of either andesite or iron nuggets at any point, which will make this belt fill up, since we are using the same belt for different items. And typically this isn't the best thing to do, but here it'll save on a lot of space. And this most likely won't happen, but just in case we get an excess of iron nuggets or andesite that clogs up this system and doesn't allow any of the other item to go in, we can just have this on the end here, which will just drop those extra items out into lava. And we'll actually need to place down our storage, which will be a 9x9 by 5-block item vault, which will give a chute, a brass funnel, and a double chest here, just so you can access those andesite alloys a bit easier. And to output these items, we'll actually place two brass funnels underneath with some andesite alloy filters on both, as well as recipe filters for andesite alloy just in case. And we'll place down our final 5-block long belt here so we can bring that andesite alloy over to this vault. And I'm going to show you quickly how to build the steam engine. And this one's actually very small, since we literally only need one blaze burner and 4 fluid tanks in this corner here, with one steam engine, one shaft, a mechanical pump here to pump in that water that we're going to need, and then we'll also need to place down a cogwheel here. And this is actually a pretty crucial item to get these mechanical mixers running, so for the people that skipped through this part, I'll be saying this again later. But we'll also need to place a copycat panel to the side with one next to that as well. And from up here, we'll place down a couple of copycat panels to keep the water from flowing out. And we'll also need to get this mechanical pump powered, and to do that we can place a cogwheel here, a shaft there, another cogwheel like that, and a gearbox just like that. And of course that needs to be vertical. And then on the side of that shaft we'll place another copycat panel, again to keep that water from spilling out. And now this is sufficient to place our 2 water buckets, and this will create an infinite source where this mechanical pump is inputting the water from. And then we'll also need a mechanical arm here, but before we do that, we'll need to give it some power, so we can place down a cogwheel like this with 2 shafts, 3 encased chain drives, 2 more shafts, and a vertical gearbox. We'll also need a place for the mechanical arm to take the lava from so it can put it into the blaze burner. So we'll place down 1 depot here with 1 block and another depot. And this will actually be a temporary block because we're going to place a brass funnel underneath, as well as 1 to the side. And this input brass funnel beneath this depot is going to need to have a empty bucket filter, and this output one from this depot onto this one is going to need a lava bucket filter. And then we'll need a spout above, not on the depot, above like that. And we can also put a lava bucket here. And then we'll hold out our mechanical arm in hand so we can give it the inputs and outputs. And we'll tell it to take items from this depot. And this is where it's going to grab that lava, where it will then need to put that into that blaze burner. So we'll tell it to deposit its items into that blaze burner. And finally, we'll tell it to deposit its empty bucket into this brass funnel here. And then we can go ahead and place that right next to it. Now this should be the steam engine finished. And we'll connect it up to everything later once we get to the part where we connect up the rest of everything. But for now, we're going to move on to that display board system. And if you don't want this display board, you can just skip ahead to the final bit of the video where I show you how to actually give everything power. But if you did want to see how to build the display board, what we'll do is place down a couple of metal girders here. And of course you could just do regular blocks, but I like the look of these girders better. So I'll do a pattern like this, and that'll allow me to place down my 10 display boards above them. And with these 10 display boards, we can actually see that they have cogwheels on them, which means they need rotational power. And to connect them up, we can just place a cogwheel like this, with a gearbox here and a couple of encased chain drives that go all the way down to these crushing wheel gearboxes. And even though they do take rotational power to run, they actually don't cost any stress units, which is very nice. And just for now, to show you how this works, I will be placing a creative motor back here, since to get this to actually show stuff on the billboard it needs power. But once we connect everything else up, we'll just connect this up to the rest of the system with the power. And we can actually see that we have 2 lines per display board, which means that we have 4 lines in total, since lines that are horizontal aren't counted as separate lines. And this allows us to actually not only get the items from inside the chest, but also from inside the vault. So what we can do is take our clipboard, and you can just type whatever makes the most sense in your build. So I'll just do something like items in vault, and then we put that on the top by right clicking it, and that should stay there forever unless you overwrite it with something else. And then I'll do the same thing but for the chest by just typing in items in chest instead, and I'll put that on the 3rd line. And now what we can do is go beneath this chest here and actually place a smart observer, and we'll need that to face the underside of the chest. Or I guess if you wanted, you could put it to the side, but under will be a bit neater since it doesn't take up the space. And then we'll need to go ahead and take our display link, right click on that display board, go beneath this smart observer, and place down that display link. And be careful not to crouch while you're placing it, because that will remove the target you selected over there. Then we can go ahead and place that here. And I want to quickly set this to only change line 2, since if we change line 1, that'll overwrite what we wrote there. And there are also 2 more settings other than just the line you want it to put the number at. And the first we can see is the type of information, which we'll want to set to list matching items. Although you could do amount of matching items if you wanted to, but I think list matching items will just make it a bit nicer. So we can set that also to full number, and this allows it to put the full number rather than just with shorten, because if you use shorten and you had something like 1000 and 5 items in the vault, it'll just say 1K, but with the full number, it'll actually show you the full amount of items in there. Until the numbers get into the tens of thousands, in which case it'll do something like 43.8K, and it won't list out all 5 digits. And once you've done that, we can just go ahead and cover this back up, and then we'll need to do the same thing with the vault, and we'll actually want to temporarily remove that lava just so we can do it without getting burnt. And we'll go under to somewhere like here, place our smart observer. We'll need to attach the second display link to that billboard, and then place it underneath this observer. And now we can do the exact same thing where it says list matching items on line 4, and then we can go ahead and cover that up. And the reason we aren't seeing any information on the display board is because we don't actually have any items in either of the storages. But this should mean that since we have power on it, I can drop something like 2 pieces of dirt in there, and it'll show that we have 2 pieces of dirt. It seems that I put the wrong lines for these, so what we can do to fix this is either go down to these display links and change the line that they change, or you could just change the actual description of the item. Either way will work. And let me just go ahead and change the other one as well. And also, if you wanted to erase something that's on a line, you could just go ahead and click on it, and that'll erase the stuff inside. And these redstone torches are for the display area, like I said, but we will need to do a couple of other things before we actually get to placing these down. And now we can actually go ahead and move on to making sure that everything else is powered before we turn this whole system on. And one here that's easy is we just place a gearbox to get the rotational power from this belt to this one. We can also get this belt spinning by placing a shaft and a gearbox here. And we'll also need a vertical gearbox with 2 shafts above it. And if you skip through the part with the steam engine, we will need a cogwheel here. I just needed to place it there to stop water from flowing. And this cogwheel obviously allows these mechanical mixers to spin, so it's pretty important. And to give this mechanical press power, we'll place down 4 encased chain drives here with a gearbox. And if you made the steam engine, we'll need to place down 3 more encased chain drives on the side of that gearbox, just like this, which will connect up to a rotation speed controller. And that controller, of course, will connect up to this shaft coming from the steam engine. And then we'll also need to set this to 256 RPM, and you may need to play around with which direction it actually outputs the rotation, since your world could be different from mine and it may need to output in a different direction. However, if you don't have the steam engine here, you could just place down a rotation speed controller and a large cogwheel, skipping the encased chain drive and the shaft. And now the only thing that should be left is our threshold switches, so we can get those automatic stopping systems just in case we need them. And now this should be everything connected up, and the last thing we need to do is put our threshold switches to keep items from being made when the vault is full. And to do that, we'll break underneath the vault, and we'll give it a threshold switch facing into the vault just like that, as well as a redstone link on the side. You can give this any frequency you want. Just make sure that whenever you come over to this one to place another redstone link, that you set this to receiver and give it that exact same frequency. Otherwise it won't catch the signal and it just won't stop when you need it to. Then we'll also need to take this and set it to stacks, and then you can hold shift and scroll all the way up to 900 stacks on the top, since that's the maximum a vault can hold. And now what'll happen is, if you have 899 stacks of items, which is like 57,000 items, so it'll take a while to get that amount, then this should allow the cobblestone generator to keep generating cobblestone so that it can keep making andesite alloy. However, once it gets to 900 stacks, it will stop that cobblestone generator from generating cobblestone until you take out some andesite alloy, in which case it'll be able to start back up again since it's not full anymore. And we'll actually want to do the same thing for this chest here, so it doesn't keep outputting andesite alloy and just letting it despawn once this chest fills up. So we can go ahead and place down a threshold switch underneath, and we'll tell it to turn the redstone link off whenever it's at 53 items or below, but turn it back on once it's at 54 or above. Then we can go ahead and place this redstone link here, give this whatever frequency you'd like, and then we can go ahead and close that hole up and place another redstone link on top or to the side of this brass funnel, giving it that same frequency as well. And we'll also set it to receiver. And now I'm quite confused as to why I added an extra threshold switch and redstone link when I didn't even need them. However, we will be needing one redstone link, and we'll be using it to power a redstone torch, and this will just allow you to know whenever your farm is not making cobblestone, just in case you didn't use glass here. So what we can do is go underneath this, just like this, and directly underneath this torch, we'll place one torch, and that will turn that torch off. And we can go ahead and give this a redstone link, which will give that same frequency from the other one. And to be clear, the other one I'm talking about is this one, since this tells it whenever the whole system is on or off. So we'll go ahead and give it that frequency, make sure it's set to receiver. And now what will happen is, if this gets powered from this vault being full, it will unpower that torch below and power on this torch, and that'll allow you to know when your farm is running if you don't have blocks that are transparent for your cobblestone generator. And before we check to see that everything works, we'll need to place down a couple of fluid pipes so that you can bring your lava from your infinite lava source over to your basin, as well as your spout if you have one. So what we can do is just place a couple of fluid pipes like this. We'll give it a pump, and you can choose however you want to power this. And this pump doesn't have to be here, you can put it anywhere that works for you, but I'll just put it here because it's easy enough to give power from the whole system. And I don't want to fill up my world with more of these giant lava pools, so for the demonstration I'll just be using a creative fluid tank, which will act as our infinite lava source. Just know that, of course, in survival, you will not be able to do this, so you will need to bring the lava from your lava pool over to here. But with that, I think it's about time that we give this whole system power. And if you're not using the steam engine, you probably know how to give this power, but if you are using this steam engine, all you have to do is manually give this little blaze burner one lava bucket. So I was going to say that you could power this by just right-clicking with a water bucket, since in creative mode that works, but I wasn't aware that it does not work in survival. So instead, to power this, we'll need to grab that hand crank from earlier, as well as a large cogwheel. And then we can temporarily remove that shaft there, give this a large cogwheel here, hand crank this until it starts working, and once it does start working, you'll need to quickly place back that shaft, and then you can remove that hand crank and large cogwheel. Now we can see that everything should be spinning the correct direction, and before we actually turn on the cobblestone generator, we'll make sure of that, just in case there's something like you needed to place shafts instead of gearboxes here, and everything seems to be good. So now we can go ahead and turn on this cobblestone generator and watch as that cobblestone gets crushed into gravel and goes into this chest, and we see that we already have gravel going over here to get washed, as well as some over here to get turned into andesite. And this wall is also working flawlessly. It's allowing the items to go in front of the funnel rather than just hitting up against the vault and then not being able to get picked up by the funnel. And I just heard that we had some presses going on, and we also are mixing items, which means that if you use the display board, pretty soon we should see some andesite alloy going into this chest. Oh, I forgot to give this power. So we will need to take that extra encased chain drive and shaft that we had, and just place one shaft there, encased chain drive there, and one above to give that power. Oh yeah, and also we'll need to place a shaft there. But now we should be able to see items going in the chest, and there it goes. It listed the 68 andesite alloy that's in there, and it's going to keep going. This is the finished build. Don't forget to leave a comment down below with what other farms you'd like to see me make in the next video. And while you're down there, I would really appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe button. Share this with any of your friends who may be interested in the Create mod, and maybe even become a member if you want to help support the channel even more. And you can also check out that playlist you see on screen now for all of the other Create mod farm tutorials I've made, just in case you wanted to see what other kinds of farms you can make. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.